Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. This is part of a block and tackle. This is the block. The block is the pulley part. I've been using these old cast pulleys as the second set of blocks, and they function, but they're really crappy. Problem is, you need to have both pulleys lined up together. The only way I was able to do that was to put a chain between these two and hook it around whatever I wanted to pull. And then I could use that as a way to multiply the force. But because they didn't line up well, I was constantly having trouble trying to get the ropes to pull straight. So that's when I picked up this block. I have this block painted, greased, and assembled. Now it's time to clean up and paint this one. It's a little more complicated. It has several different additional pieces. One of them is a locking device so that you can actually cinch the rope into it. And we'll talk more about that as we go along doing the disassembly. We'll also reweave the end of this so that it's down to a reasonable size, and I get rid of this piece of electrical tape on it. The only problem with lines is they can get to be a real rat's nest. When I was a young man, I worked for a company called Borg-Warner. It was a plant where they made prototype radiators. So we were a bit outside the norm for Borg-Warner, which was a large corporation with very hidebound, rigid ways of doing things. Well, because we were making prototype radiators, there was a lot of experimental things coming in, new equipment being tried out, short runs. That meant that a lot of equipment came in and out. We hired riggers for that. By we, I mean Borg-Warner hired riggers for that. I worked maintenance. That meant that I ran wire and hooked up plumbing and ran drain lines and things like that, and put the mechanical parts of the equipment together, and then I was responsible for the repair and maintenance of it. That meant that I worked with the riggers quite a bit. And the riggers, they were an interesting group, very diverse. Some were from Canada, some were from the United States. Many of them were from a great distance away, but they all had one thing in common. They were well trained. They also brought in a wide variety of equipment with them. Cranes, come-alongs, fork trucks, lift trucks, tractors, all kinds of equipment, heavy equipment for moving these large pieces of equipment around. Well, one group came in and they had a lot of rope. And their rope was interesting in that every end on the rope was braided back. They had taken the end of the rope and tucked the ends back in and made this little ball on the end of it so that the rope didn't unravel. And I was fascinated. I thought that was really cool. So I got to talking to one of them. He cut one of the ends off of an old rope and he said, "Here, practice." So I took apart the rope that they had and I struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled until I figured out how they did it. And then I was able to braid the end of the rope back so that the end of the rope didn't unravel. Now there's a way to do it by reducing the size of the strands so that the end of the rope is the same diameter as the rest of the rope. But for this purpose, I'm not going to do that. I don't want the end coming out of the pulley. I like to use a pair of dikes to cut off the rope, just because it gives a little cleaner cut. And I unwind the rope back about 4 or 5 inches. Now some people put a wrap of tape around this part. I think that's an unnecessary bit of work, but I do wrap the ends of the strand with a bit of tape. And the only reason for doing that is to keep it tightly wound while you're doing the braiding. Because without that, it's going to tend to spring open on you. You can do it without doing this. I suppose if somebody was more skilled at it than I am, this would be an unnecessary waste of time. But I only do this once in a blue moon. And for me, it makes the job a little easier. And when you're starting, it's probably a good idea just to make life easier for yourself. Because the goal is to have the rope braided. Okay, now we've got it opened up about 5 inches. Front strand folds over, the back strand goes over that. And the left strand comes underneath. See how you end up with that nice little triangle? What you're trying to do is just knot the ends of the rope together. It should end up looking just like that. Front strand goes under into the back strand gets folded over, side strand gets folded over the back strand and tucked underneath the front strand. It forms 3 overlapping strands and locks the end of the rope. Now you could just leave the rope like this, cut it off, but it'll come untied really quick. There's really not a whole lot of grip on that rope. So to stop that from happening, we're going to weave this back in. The way we're going to do that, this strand goes over the top of this strand and underneath this one. This one locks it down. So I open up the strands, take this strand and tuck it underneath. Now see how it's trapped over the top of that one? Now I come around to this one, and this one is going to come over this strand and under that one. Over this strand, under that one. Then we come down and do the final one over this strand and under that one. This is where it can get confusing. We want to have this strand go over the top of that strand and underneath this one. See how we come out with this triangular shape again? 3 strands coming out that way. If it doesn't look like this, you got it wrong. Go back and do it again. Before you get the hang of this, you'll make at least one mistake. And if you don't, please write and tell me, because I'd be really interested to see how you did it. Now we just carry on doing the same thing over and over. This strand goes over that one and under this one. Over, under, lock down. Then this strand goes over that one and under this one. Then this strand goes over that one and under this one. It's the third strand that always messes me up. I look at it and it doesn't look right, so I think I should put it underneath the one down further. And that doesn't work. And I like to keep twisting the strands as I take them down. I want to have them stay nice and tight. See how the end is like that? And that's how you braid a rope back. Now once I've got it braided down to where I want it, just clipped off those ends. Pull on them, twist it a little bit. It's all locked together. That's braiding back the end of the line. Now don't expect to do this right the first time. I still make mistakes. This is something I learned long before I ever even thought about going on a sailboat. There's a lot of uses for this kind of a knot. You can put it on the end of ropes for fenders. Just keep weaving this thing back in and making it bigger and bigger. You can There's a lot of uses for this knot, but for me, the best one is just make the end of the rope so it doesn't open up and fray. It also has the advantage of not wanting to come out of the block. So before you put your ropes in the blocks, you can only put one of these on the end. If you put both ends into this, you're going to have a hard time getting this thing put together. So that's what little bit I know about braiding the end of the rope. I'm sure there's other places on the internet that you can find drawings and descriptions of how to go about doing it. That's my way. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.